1 Samuel 1 1-28, through the Bible. Chapter 1. Theme: Birth of Samuel, Samuel taken to Eli. This first book of Samuel opens with the cry of a godly woman. While the people cry for a king, Hannah cries for a child. God builds the throne on a woman's cry. When woman takes her exalted place, God builds her a throne. Eli, the high priest, thinks Hannah is drunk as she prays before the tabernacle in Shiloh. When he discovers her true anxiety for a child, he blesses her. Samuel is born to Hannah and she brings him to Eli in fulfillment of her vow. Now there was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim, of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tehu, the son of Zuph, an Ephrathite, and he had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah, and Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. 1 Samuel 1 1-2. Elkanah had 2 wives. Perhaps you are thinking that God approved of this. No, my friend, as you read this history you will find that God did not approve of his having 2 wives. The fact that certain things are recorded in Scripture does not mean that God sanctions them. He is merely giving you the facts concerning history, persons, and events. For example, you will find that the lie of Satan is recorded in Scripture, but that does not mean God approves it. God showed his disapproval when Abraham took the maid Hagar as his second wife. In fact, the fruits of his sin are still in existence. Ishmael, Abraham's son by Hagar, became the head of the Arab nation, and the Jews and Arabs are still at odds today. Because Elkanah had 2 wives, there was trouble in the family. This is evidence that God is not blessing them at this particular time. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. 1 Samuel 1:3. This verse disturbed me for a long time. Why in the world did Samuel have to tell us that the sons of Eli were at the tabernacle? Later on we will find out. Going to worship God at the tabernacle was not all that you might suppose it to be. Actually it was a dangerous place to be, because these sons of Eli were sons of Belial, or sons of the devil, if you please. Some churches are the worst places you can be in and the most dangerous places for you. I have heard people say concerning the upper room, how wonderful to have been there with Jesus. Would it? Do you know who was in the upper room? Satan. He was not invited, but he was there. The record tells us that Satan entered into Judas. The upper room was the most dangerous place to be in Jerusalem that night. So, going to worship God had its difficulties in Samuel's day. Evil was present there in the persons of Eli's sons. It is interesting that this is mentioned at this juncture in 1 Samuel. And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife, and to all her sons and her daughters, portions, but unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord had shut up her womb. 1 Samuel 1 4-5. Elkanah gave more to Hannah than he did to his other wife and all of their children. Why? He loved Hannah. And her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. 1 Samuel 1:6. Who was Hannah's adversary? It was Peninnah, Elkanah's other wife. They were not on speaking terms, and it was not a very pleasant home. Who told you that God approves of a man having 2 wives? They were having family trouble, and they did not have a counselor to whom they could go for help. Hannah was probably one of the most miserable persons in the world at this time, but she went to God in prayer. And as he did so year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her, therefore she wept, and did not eat. Then said Elkanah her husband to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am not I better to thee than 10 sons? So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh, and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord. And she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. And she vowed a vow, and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but wilt give unto thine handmaid a man child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. 1 Samuel 1 7-11. The expression she was in bitterness of soul describes her deep disappointment at not having a son. So she prayed for a son and promised God 2 things if her desire was granted. 1, he would be a priest in the Levitical service all the days of his life, and, 2, she would make him a Nazirite unto God, that is, he would be separated unto the service of God. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. Now Hannah, she spake in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. 1 Samuel 1:12-13. Eli was the high priest, and he saw this distraught woman come to the tabernacle and pray. He watched her mouth, saw her lips move, but could not hear any sound. Neither, apparently, could he read her lips. Notice his reaction, which is an insight into the conditions of that day. The sons of Eli drank and caroused there. Eli knew it but had shut his eyes to it. He was an indulgent father. When Hannah prayed with such zeal in her heart, Eli thought she was drunk. Do you know why? Others who were drunk had come to the house of the Lord. This place of worship wasn't really the best place to come in that day. And Eli said unto her, How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. 1 Samuel 1:14-15. We don't see much praying like Hannah's today. Would people think you were drunk by the way you pray? Our prayers are very dignified. Hannah, not wanting Eli to have the wrong impression, said, Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. And she said, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way, and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. 1 Samuel 1:16-18. Eli realized his mistake and gave a prophetic blessing. That Hannah's countenance was no more sad indicates her confidence that God had heard and would answer her prayer. Samuel's birth. Wherefore it came to pass, when the time was come about after Hannah had conceived, that she bare a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked him of the Lord. 1 Samuel 1:20. The name Samuel means heard of God. As I have said previously, this book of 1 Samuel opens with the cry of a godly woman. While the people are crying for a king, Hannah is crying out for a child. God builds the throne on a woman's cry. When a woman takes her exalted place, God builds her a throne. What a contrast that is to our contemporary society. For the past few months we have heard nothing on the news but abortion, abortion, abortion. Here is Hannah who wants a child, and some women today do not want their children. Of course there are times when abortion is essential for the mother's life or even for the sake of the child, but that should be determined by expert, scientific consultation. However, the issue today is that people want to sin, but they do not want to pay the consequences for their sin. My position is that when people sin they should bear the fruit of their sin. If a child is conceived, that child should be born and should be the responsibility of those who brought him into the world. People are trying hard to get away from the fruit of sin. We need to understand this principle, be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Galatians 6:7. We are living in a day of abortion. Hannah lived in a day when she wanted a son, and she dedicated that son unto the Lord. On her cry, God built a kingdom. What a tremendous tribute and wonderful monument to this woman's cry. Samuel taken to Eli. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, with 3 bullocks, and 1 ephah of flour, and a bottle of wine, and brought him unto the house of the Lord in Shiloh, and the child was young. And they slew a bullock, and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as thy soul liveth, my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here, praying unto the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition which I asked of him, therefore also I have lent him to the Lord, as long as he liveth he shall be lent to the Lord. And he worshipped the Lord there. 1 Samuel 1:24-28. When Hannah took her offering to the Lord, she kept her vow to God. She said, I have promised to bring this little one to the Lord, and here he is. Lent is definitely a poor word to describe Hannah's gift of Samuel to the Lord. Her decision to give him completely over to the service of the Lord is irrevocable.